She found a boy in the snow. That simple act of kindness pulled a struggling mother into a hidden world of loyalty, betrayal, and shocking legacy. She would have to become the unlikeliest ruler to protect a stolen kingdom. If you're new here, subscribe and comment your location. Now let's begin. The snow fell in thick, heavy flakes, sticking to Mercy's lashes as she trudged home from her second shift at the diner. The path through the empty park was a stupid shortcut, one she only took when she was dead on her feet and her babysitter, Mrs. Gable, was charging by the minute. Tonight, the cold bit through her thin waitress uniform, a vicious chill that made her bones ache. That's when she saw it, a dark shape against the pure white near the old bandstand, not trash, a person her breath caught. She ran, her worn-out sneakers slipping in the snow. It was a boy, maybe 13. He was pale, his lips blue, dressed in a denim jacket that was no match for the storm. A fallen motorcycle lay a few yards away, half buried. Hey kid, she shook his shoulder, no response. His pulse was there but thready and slow. Panic, sharp and familiar, shot through her. This was her worst nightmare, her own son Daniel, sick with fever last winter, flashing in her mind. Without another thought, she stripped off her only coat, her puffy winter parka, and wrapped it tightly around the boy. She fumbled her phone from her jeans pocket, her fingers stiff, and dialed 911. Then she lay down beside him in the snow, pulling his icy form against her, sharing her body heat, talking to him, telling him to hold on, that help was coming. She didn't see the headlights at first, not until they were right there, painting the scene in bright white. The ambulance arrived, but so did 3 other vehicles, big rumbling trucks that surrounded the area. Men poured out, big men, leather vests, beards, eyes hidden by shadows. Mercy scrambled to her feet, shielding the boy as the paramedics moved in. One of the bikers, a giant with a shaved head and a scar through his eyebrow, stepped forward. His eyes were on the boy, and the raw fear she saw there stopped her from speaking. "Is he breathing?" the man growled, his voice rough. "Yes, I found him. The ambulance is here," Mercy said, her voice trembling. The man, who she would learn was called Mark, looked from the boy to her shivering form in just her uniform sweater. He saw her coat, wrapped tightly around the child. He didn't say thank you. He just took off his own heavy leather cut, draped it over her shoulders, and said, "You're coming with us." It wasn't a request. The next hours were a blur. The hospital, the waiting room that smelled of antiseptic and leather, the silent, imposing men who took up all the space. Mercy wanted to go home to Daniel, but Mark's hand on her arm, gentle but firm, held her. "You saved him. You need to see this through," he said, and something in his tone told her it was about more than gratitude. The doctor came out, said the boy, whose name was Leo, would be fine. Hypothermia, a broken arm, but he was tough. A collective sigh went through the bikers. Then Mark turned to Mercy. "We need to talk, privately." He led her to a grim, windowless room in the back of the clubhouse. An hour later, the walls were lined with photos of men on bikes, group shots, a somber memorial corner. Another man was there, older, with sharp blue eyes and a silver beard. James, the club's treasurer. Mark spoke plainly. "Leo is not just any kid. His father was our president, Arthur. He was killed last week. A rival club, a setup." Mercy nodded slowly. "I'm sorry, but why tell me this?" James leaned forward. "Because Leo is Arthur's only child, a secret. His mother, she's not in the picture, never was. Arthur kept him hidden to protect him. Now, with Arthur gone, the club is unstable. There are men inside who would use the boy as a puppet, or worse, get rid of him to clear the path to the throne." Mercy's mind was reeling. What does this have to do with me? Mark's gaze was intense. "You saved him. You, a stranger with no stake in this, gave him your only coat. You risked yourself for him. The club saw that. We have a code. It means something. In our world, that act makes a claim. It makes you family." "I don't want to be family," Mercy whispered, panic rising. "It's not about what you want," James said, not unkindly. "It's about what Leo needs, and what the club needs. We need a regent, someone to hold the president's seat for now, someone everyone can agree on, who has no old loyalties, no hunger for power for themselves, someone whose only interest is the boy's well-being." Mercy laughed, a short, hysterical sound. "You want me, a diner waitress, a single mom, to run your motorcycle club?" Not run it, Mark corrected. Hold it, stabilize it, for Leo. Until he's of age, you'll have us, me, James, a few others. We'll handle the business. You handle the club's voice. You sit at the head of the table. You make the final calls, guided by us, to keep the wolves at bay. And if I say no? James's face was grim. Then the club fractures, war, and Leo becomes the prize in a fight he won't survive. The people who killed Arthur will find him. They're already looking. Mercy thought of Daniel, safe at home. She thought of this boy, Leo, alone in a hospital bed with a target on his back. The maternal instinct that had made her give up her coat now roared inside her. It was insane. It was suicidal, but saying no felt like sentencing a child to death. I have a son, she said finally. Daniel, he's 8. His safety is non-negotiable. A slow nod from Mark. He'll be under our protection, the best. You'll both live at the compound. It's the safest place. And my job, my life. This is your job now, James said. He reached behind a chair and brought out a leather vest. It was worn, but on the back, instead of the full club insignia, was a single large patch. It read simply, Regent. You wear this. You sit at the head. You listen, you learn, you speak when we tell you to. You are the shield for the air. Mercy reached out, her fingers touching the cold leather. This was it, the point of no return. She thought of snow and a blue-lipped boy and her coat. She took the vest. The next week was a whirlwind of terrifying firsts, moving her and Daniel into a secure apartment above the clubhouse. Daniel's wide-eyed awe at the motorcycles, quickly tempered by Mercy's strict rules. Her first church meeting, what the club called its official gathering. The room was thick with smoke and tension. 20 hardened men stared at her as she walked in, Mark and James flanking her. She wore her regent's vest over a simple black shirt. She felt every eye on her, suspicion, hostility, curiosity. Mark pulled out the president's chair at the head of the long table. Her chair. She sat, her legs weak. Church is in session, Mark announced, his voice cutting through the murmur. A bulky man with a red beard, Paul, slammed his hand on the table. This is a joke. We're supposed to follow orders from some waitress who got lucky. Mercy's heart hammered against her ribs. She remembered James's advice, speak soft, but own the silence. She waited, let the challenge hang. Then she looked at Paul, not with anger, but with a calm she didn't feel. Arthur's son is alive because of me, she said, her voice clear in the quiet room. My only interest is his safety and the stability of this club until he can lead it. If that's a joke, Paul, then maybe you don't understand what loyalty to Arthur really means. A few heads nodded. Paul scowled but sat back. The meeting proceeded, territory disputes, money issues, whispers of the rattlesnakes, the rival club suspected of Arthur's murder. Mercy said little, but she watched. She learned. She saw the alliances, the tensions, and she saw the way Mark watched over her, a constant, steady presence. Later that night, after Daniel was asleep, she found Mark on the clubhouse roof, staring at the city lights. You did good today, he said, not looking at her. I felt like I was going to throw up, she admitted, hugging herself against the cold. He finally glanced at her, a ghost of a smile on his lips. But you didn't, you held it, that's what matters. He stood close, the heat from his body a tangible force. The chemistry between them had been immediate, a live wire neither dared to touch. He was a criminal, she was a regent. It was a line that couldn't be crossed, but in the quiet dark it hummed between them. You're not like anyone I've ever known, Mercy. This life, it hardens people, but you. You're strong because you're not hard. It's confusing as hell. She looked up at him. It's confusing for me too, Mark. He reached out, his calloused fingers barely brushing a strand of hair from her cheek. The touch was electric, charged with everything unsaid. Then he dropped his hand, stepping back. Get some sleep. Tomorrow's another day. Days turned into weeks. Mercy learned the business, the legitimate auto shops, the less legitimate side hustles. She used her mom's skills to organize the club's messy finances, seeing things James had missed. She negotiated a tense dispute with a trucking company, not with threats, but with a clear, fair breakdown of mutual benefit, astonishing the gruff negotiator on the other side. There were light moments, too, teaching Leo, now recovered and a quiet, observant boy, how to make pancakes with Daniel. the two boys becoming fast friends, a bright spot in the grim reality. Watching the biggest, toughest biker, a man called Tiny, patiently help Daniel fix a flat tire on his bicycle, speaking in a gentle rumble. But the threat was always there. The rattlesnakes were making moves, testing borders. Then the message came, a gift left at the gate of the compound, a rattlesnake skin nailed to a piece of wood, and a note, "A regent is a temporary thing." The club was furious, shouting for war. Mercy stood in the middle of the chaos, feeling the panic rise. Then she saw Leo's face, pale and scared. She climbed onto a pool table, whistling sharply. "Enough," she yelled. The room fell silent, shocked. "This is what they want. They want us angry, divided, rushing out so they can pick us off. We are not doing what they want. We are not giving them what they want." "So what do we do, Regent?" Paul sneered. Mercy met his gaze. "We throw a party." The room erupted in confusion. Mark stared at her, a slow understanding dawning in his eyes. "We invite the whole neighborhood," Mercy continued. "A barbecue, a show of strength and unity. The rattlesnakes want us hiding behind walls. We'll be out in the open, laughing, strong, and surrounded by our community. They won't dare hit us then. It shows we're not scared. And it reminds everyone who we are here. We're not just a club, we are part of this town." James began to chuckle, then to laugh. It was brilliant, not a knife, but a shield, a mother's instinct to gather her flock close and present a united front. The barbecue was a surreal success. Hot dogs, burgers, kids running around, music. Neighbors who'd been wary mingled with bikers in cuts. Mercy moved through the crowd, the regent vest over a summer dress, greeting people, her smile genuine. She saw the rattlesnake scouts in their cars at the end of the street, watching, confused and thwarted by the display of normalcy. That night, after everyone had left, Mark found her cleaning up. "That was a masterstroke," he said, his voice warm with admiration. "You outmaneuvered them without throwing a single punch." "It's what you do when you can't fight fair," she said, stacking plates. "You changed the game." He was close again. The air between them thickened. This time he didn't step back. He cupped her face, his thumb stroking her cheek. "Mercy," he whispered, a tortured sound. The kiss, when it came, was not gentle. It was hungry, full of weeks of pent-up longing and shared danger. It was fire and promise and a terrible, wonderful mistake. She kissed him back, her hands fisting in his shirt, pulling him closer, forgetting for one dizzying moment about regents and heirs and rival clubs. A crash from the kitchen made them spring apart. Daniel stood there, holding a dropped soda can, looking between them with big eyes. "Mom." Mercy's face flushed. "It's okay, honey, go back to bed." Daniel scampered off, and the spell was broken, replaced by a heavy, complicated reality. "That can't happen again," Mercy breathed, though every part of her screamed otherwise. Mark nodded, his jaw tight. "I know, but for the record it should." The fragile piece shattered a week later. Leo was missing. He'd been in the compound's backyard with Daniel. One minute they were there, the next, only Daniel remained, crying, saying a man in a black jacket promised him ice cream if he went quiet. The clubhouse exploded into controlled chaos. Mercy's world narrowed to a single, piercing point of terror. This was her fault. She had failed. Mark was barking orders, tracking teams, his face a mask of fury and fear. Then her phone buzzed. An unknown number, a text. "Want the kid? Come alone, the old sawmill. You have 1 hour, tell the dogs and he dies." Mercy showed Mark. He immediately said, "No, it's a trap. We go in force." "They'll kill him," Mercy cried. "And they'll kill you," Mark roared. "Then what? We lose you both." Mercy looked at him, at the men ready to ride to war. She thought of Leo, scared. She thought of her son, Daniel, who needed his mother. She thought of the coat in the snow. This was the moment, the ultimate test of her strange, unwanted power. "No," she said, her voice suddenly steady. "I'm the regent. This is my call. I'm going, alone. But you," she looked at Mark, then James, her eyes blazing with a plan born of pure maternal desperation. "You don't follow me. You find out where the rattlesnakes are keeping their most precious thing, and you take it." It was a gamble, a huge one, using their tactics against them, hostage for a hostage. An hour later, Mercy walked into the dark, cavernous sawmill alone, her heart a drum in her chest. The air smelled of rust and old wood. A single light bulb hung over a clearing. Leo was tied to a chair, gagged, his eyes wide with fear. 3 rattlesnake members stood around him. The leader was a thin, wiry man with cold eyes. The waitress regent, brave or stupid. "Let him go, you have me." "The plan was always to have you," the man smiled. "You're the key. With you dead, the club falls apart. The boy is easy pickings after." He raised a gun. Mercy froze, her mind screaming for a way out. Suddenly, a phone rang, the wiry man's phone. He answered, his smirk fading into confusion, then rage. He listened, his eyes locked on Mercy with newfound furious respect. "You," he spat, "what did you do?" Mercy held her breath. She didn't know. The man lowered the phone. "My president's son, my son, your dogs have him, at our clubhouse." The other 2 men shifted nervously. Mercy let out a slow breath. Mark had done it. "Seems we have a standoff," she said, forcing strength into her voice. "You have mine, I have yours, so we trade, clean, simple, or we all lose what we love most." The wiry man's jaw worked. He was outmaneuvered, and he knew it. He couldn't explain losing his own son to his club. He snarled, but gave a sharp nod to his men. "Cut the kid loose." They did. Leo ran to Mercy, clinging to her. She held him close, never taking her eyes off the gun. "We'll be at the overpass in 1 hour. Bring your boy, we bring Leo. A straight trade." She walked out, holding Leo, expecting a bullet in her back with every step. It never came. The standoff held. The trade, an hour later under the harsh lights of the overpass, was tense and silent. 2 scared boys were exchanged. No shots were fired. As the rattlesnakes peeled away, Mark and the club pulled in around Mercy and Leo, a wall of leather and loyalty. Back at the compound, the atmosphere was different. The men looked at Mercy not with tolerance, but with genuine respect. She had faced down the enemy and won, not with muscle, but with strategy and nerve. She had used a mother's ruthless love as a weapon. Later, in the quiet of her apartment, with both boys asleep safe, there was a soft knock. Mark, he didn't speak. He just pulled her into his arms, holding her as she finally shook apart, the adrenaline crashing. He stroked her hair. "You were magnificent," he murmured into her hair. "You saved him, again." She looked up at him. The line was still there, but it was blurred, tangled with shared fear and towering respect. This time, when he kissed her, it was softer, deeper, a promise and a beginning. It was a problem for tomorrow. Tonight, they were alive, and the child was safe, and the kingdom, for now, was held. But as Mercy finally drifted to sleep, the leather regent vest hanging on her chair, she knew this was only the beginning. The rattlesnakes were humiliated, not defeated. Paul and his faction still grumbled inside the club. And the charged, impossible thing between her and Mark was a new kind of danger. She had survived the first storm, but more were coming. She held onto that thought as sleep took her. She had to be ready. For Leo, for Daniel. For the kingdom she never wanted, but was now hers to protect. The morning after the trade was a strange, quiet victory. The clubhouse, usually buzzing with rough energy, was subdued. Men moved with a new, deliberate purpose, and their nods to Mercy held a weight that hadn't been there before. She wasn't just the waitress in a vest anymore. She was the regent who'd stared down the rattlesnakes and brought their heir home. But the peace was thin. Paul, the red-bearded challenger, watched it all with a simmering resentment. He wanted a war, a bloody show of force. Mercy's clever, peaceful resolution made him and his allies look like hot-headed fools. He cornered James in the garage 2 days later, his voice a low growl Mercy wasn't meant to hear from the office above. "She got lucky, James. This isn't how we handle things. We look weak, trading hostages like politicians. Next, she'll want us to file taxes together." James's reply was calm. "We have the boy, we have our honor, and we have our money. No one died. That's not weakness, Paul. That's smart business, something we could use more of." Paul spat on the floor. Arthur would be spinning in his grave. Mercy leaned back from the vent, her heart pounding. The enemy outside was clear. The enemy inside was more dangerous. She started spending more time with James, learning the books not just for organization, but for leverage. She discovered small discrepancies, payments to a towing company that didn't exist, gasoline receipts that were too high. She didn't confront anyone. She filed the information away, her own insurance. Her relationship with Mark was a constant, thrilling tension. They stole moments. A brush of hands passing a tool in the garage, lingering looks across the church table, late-night talks on the roof that walked the razor's edge between friendship and something more. It was a dangerous distraction, but it was also her anchor. In this world of calculated brutality, what they had felt frighteningly real. The Rattlesnakes' retaliation came not with guns, but with lawyers. A formal notice arrived, claiming the club's prime auto shop was on disputed territory based on old, shaky property lines. It was a move to cripple their biggest legitimate income source. The club was outraged, but stumped. Legal battles weren't their forte. Mercy, however, spent a day at the county records office with a friendly, confused clerk she'd once served endless coffee to. She returned with photocopied maps and a triumphant gleam in her eye. At the next church meeting, she laid them out. The rattlesnake claim is based on a survey from 1972, she said, pointing. But this clause here, in the original land grant, shows the boundary follows the creek bed, which shifted in the 50s. Our shop is 100 feet inside our line. Their claim is garbage. Paul stared. How did you find that? I asked nicely and brought donuts to the records clerk, Mercy said simply. It's called doing your homework. The club laughed, a real relieved sound. They'd expected a fight. She'd given them a win. Even Paul looked grudgingly impressed. But the real storm hit a week later. Daniel had a school play. Mercy, determined to give him some normalcy, went alone with him, leaving Leo under heavy guard at the compound. It was a sweet, ordinary night. Daniel was a talking tree. Mercy clapped until her hands hurt. Walking back to her car in the school parking lot, she felt a prickling on her neck. A van slid up beside her, doors sliding open. Two men lunged out. One grabbed Daniel, a hand over his mouth. The other went for Mercy. Motherhood unleashed a different kind of animal. Mercy didn't scream. She swung her heavy purse, connecting with a sickening thud against a temple. The man grabbing her staggered. She dropped her keys, snatched them up, and raked the pointed end down the arm of the man holding Daniel. He yelled, loosening his grip. Daniel bit down hard on his hand. "Run to the school, Daniel, now," she roared. Her son, wide-eyed with terror, sprinted back toward the lights. Mercy stood between the men and his retreating form, her keys held like a knife, breathing like a bull. "Come on, then," she snarled. The men hesitated, spooked by her ferocity. Sirens wailed in the distance. Someone had called the cops. The van doors slammed and it screeched away. Mercy collapsed against her car, trembling. They'd come for her son. The unspoken rule was broken. This was no longer about the club. This was personal. Back at the compound, Mark was a volcano of cold fury. "That's it. We wiped them out. Every last one." "No," Mercy said, her voice like ice. She was changed. The softness was still there, but it was sheathed in steel. "We don't wipe them out. We cut the head off. Cleanly. Paul was right about one thing. We need to send a message they understand, but we'll do it my way." Her plan was audacious. It wasn't an attack on their clubhouse, which would be a war. It was a surgical strike. She learned from James that the Rattlesnake president, a man called Vance, had a mistress in a downtown apartment. He visited her every Thursday night, alone, vulnerable during the drive. The following Thursday, Mercy didn't stay behind. She insisted on being part of the crew. Mark, James, and two other trusted men rode out with her in a nondescript van. They intercepted Vance's car on a quiet, tree-lined street. It was quick, professional. Vance was pulled from his car, disarmed, and shoved into the van, confused and furious. He was brought to the club's garage, blindfolded. When the blindfold was removed, he didn't see a circle of leering bikers. He saw Mercy, sitting on a workbench, the regent vest stark in the fluorescent light. Mark stood behind her, a silent sentinel. "You," Vance sneered, though fear flickered in his eyes. "Me," Mercy agreed. "You tried to take my son. You broke the one rule even animals follow." "It's business," Vance spat. "This isn't business," Mercy said, sliding off the bench. She walked up to him, her gaze unwavering. "This is a mother talking. You see, I don't care about your territory. I don't care about your money. I only care about two boys, and you are a threat to them. So here's the new business." She laid it out. Vance would call his club. He would tell them the war was over. The territory dispute was dropped. Any move against the regent, her family, or the heir would result in his immediate and very quiet execution, not by the club but by her, personally. "And why would I do that?" Vance laughed, a hollow sound. Mercy nodded to Mark. He opened a laptop showing a live feed. It was Vance's own son, the one they'd taken in the trade, playing video games in a safe house, unharmed but clearly under guard. "Because you love your son," Mercy said softly, "just like I love mine. This ends now. You back off and you keep your club, your life, and your boy. You don't, and you lose all three, your choice." Vance's defiance crumbled. He saw not a rival, but a force of nature he couldn't beat with a bullet. He saw the cold truth in her eyes. He made the call. The news spread through the underworld like a shockwave. The rattlesnakes stood down. The regent had won without a single shot fired in the final act, using a man's own love against him. At the next church meeting, the atmosphere was electric. Paul stood up. He looked around the room, then at Mercy. He walked to the front, pulled a knife from his belt, and laid it on the table in front of her, a symbol of submission. "The chair is yours, Regent," he said, his voice rough but clear. "For Arthur, for the boy." He returned to his seat. The challenge was over. That night on the roof, it was just Mercy and Mark. The city lights glittered below, a kingdom she now strangely ruled. "You did it," Mark said, his hand finding hers. "You really did it. The club is stable. The threat is gone. Leo is safe." "For now," she said, leaning into him. He turned her to face him. "Mercy, this is for now anymore. This is your life, our life, the club, they're yours." And he took a deep breath. "I'm yours, if you'll have me, not as a bodyguard, not as an ally, as your man." He kissed her, and this time there was no hesitation, no guilt. It was a kiss of homecoming, of a future they could finally grasp. She kissed him back, pouring all the fear, the strength, the unbelievable journey into it. Weeks later they held a ceremony, not a wedding, but a formal patch-in, for Leo. He stood before the assembled club, a smaller version of the leather cut on his back, the president's patch resting on a shelf until he came of age. Mercy stood beside him, her regent patch firm on her shoulder. One by one, every member, starting with Mark, then James, then even Paul, came forward. They didn't kneel to Leo, the child. They placed a hand on his shoulder, a gesture of loyalty and protection. Then they turned to Mercy and gave a slow, respectful nod. To the regent, to the mother who held the line. Later, as music played and the club celebrated, Mercy sat at the head of the table. Leo and Daniel were laughing over a pool game, surrounded by giant, smiling men who would die for them. Mark stood behind her, his hands resting on her shoulders. She looked out at the room, the gritty, dangerous, loyal family she'd never asked for. She thought of a coat left in the snow, a simple act of kindness that had led here. To power, to love, to a home. She wasn't a waitress anymore, she was the regent, and she was exactly where she was meant to be. The celebration was in full swing, but Mercy felt a restless energy. The peace was too quiet, the victory too complete. She watched as Paul clapped Mark on the back, laughing at some old story about Arthur. It felt off. Her mom instinct, now honed into a razor-sharp survival tool, was screaming. She slipped into the back office, where James kept the real books. She wasn't looking for financial discrepancies this time. She was looking for a pattern. The rattlesnakes had folded too easily. Vance had given in with a surrender that felt theatrical. She pulled out the old club rosters, the ride schedules from the weeks before Arthur's murder. Her eyes scanned names, dates. Her blood ran cold. The night Arthur was killed, the security detail was light, too light. It had been changed at the last minute. The man who authorized the change, Paul. And the supposed rattlesnake who'd been caught and gave up Vance's location for the kidnapping, a low-level guy who'd later vanished. He'd been recruited by Arthur, but sponsored into the club by Paul. It wasn't just a rivalry, it was a coup. Paul hadn't just been challenging her authority, He'd been cleaning up the mess of his own betrayal. He'd allied with the rattlesnakes to kill Arthur, expecting to seize power in the chaos. But Mercy's arrival, her stabilizing presence, had ruined it. The hostage-taking, the attack on Daniel, it wasn't just the rattlesnakes. It was Paul trying to destabilize her, to force a war where he could emerge as the savior. She had to get to Mark, now. She found him by the bar, pouring a drink. She grabbed his arm, her fingers tight. "We need to talk, privately, right now." Her voice was low, urgent. He saw the terror in her eyes and didn't hesitate. He followed her to their rooftop space. "What is it?" "It's Paul," she breathed, the words tumbling out. She showed him the rosters, pointed to the changed schedule. "He set Arthur up. He's been working with Vance the whole time. The attack on Daniel, it wasn't just to get to me. It was to make you and the club furious, to make you launch that all-out war he kept wanting. He'd have looked like the strong leader in the fight he helped create." Mark's face went from confusion to a dawning, horrific understanding, then settled into a mask of terrifying calm. "The vote," he said quietly. "What vote?" "After Arthur died, before you came, there was a vote for interim president. It was between me and Paul. It was a tie. His faction, his friends, it makes sense now. They weren't just disagreeing with you, Mercy. They were hiding a secret." Down below, the music suddenly cut off. A sharp, ringing sound of a bottle breaking, then shouting. They ran downstairs. The scene in the clubhouse was tense division. Paul stood in the center of the room, backed by 6 men. The rest of the club, including James, faced them, confused but ready. "It's time to stop this farce," Paul yelled, his voice dripping with false righteousness. "This club is weak, led by an outsider and her pet soldier. The rattlesnakes are laughing at us. I say we finish what we started and take back our pride." He was making his move, now, before Mercy could reveal what she knew. Mark stepped forward, putting himself between Paul's group and Mercy. "You want to finish what you started, Paul?" Mark's voice was a deadly whisper that carried. "You mean like you finished Arthur, by setting him up to be murdered?" A gasp went through the room. Paul's eyes widened, then narrowed. "Lies, you're desperate." Mercy stepped out from behind Mark. She held up the rosters. "The security changed the night Arthur died. You signed it, Paul, and the man who gave us Vance, he was your prospect. You handed him to us to control the narrative, to point us at the rattlesnakes while you sat back and watched the chaos." The room was frozen, a tableau of betrayal. Paul's men looked uneasy, shifting on their feet. The truth was a cold knife in the hot room. Paul's hand went to his waistband. "You think a piece of paper matters?" he snarled. Everything happened at once. Paul drew a gun. Mark tackled Mercy behind the pool table. Shots rang out, deafening in the enclosed space. But Paul wasn't aiming at Mercy or Mark. He fired at James, who crumpled to the ground. It was the wrong move. James was beloved, old guard. The sight of him falling broke the spell of indecision. The club, as one, turned on the traitors. It wasn't a gunfight. It was a brutal, swift eruption of fists and fury. Paul's men were overwhelmed, disarmed, and dragged down. Paul himself tried to run for the back door. Mercy saw him go. She didn't think. She grabbed a pool cue from the floor and followed, Mark right behind her. They cornered him in the dark, grimy alley behind the compound. He was breathing hard, gun still in hand, but his eyes were wild, trapped. "It's over, Paul," Mark said, his own weapon raised. "It's never over," Paul spat, swinging the gun between them. "She's ruined everything. This club was mine. Arthur was weak. I made her strong with the snakes, a partnership." "You sold your president," Mercy said, her voice shaking not with fear but with fury. "For a seat at a bigger table. You let them think they could take my son." Paul's gun steadied on her. "You're just a hiccup." A shot exploded. Mercy flinched, but it was Paul's gun. It was Mark's. A single, precise shot to Paul's shoulder. Paul screamed, his gun clattering to the asphalt. Mark was on him in an instant, disarming him, pulling his arms behind his back. Mercy stood over him, looking down at the man who had caused so much pain. He was just a wounded, angry man now. The power was gone. "You don't get to die a martyr," she said, her voice cold. "You get to live as a reminder of what happens to traitors." The club voted unanimously at the emergency church meeting that night. Paul and his inner circle were excommunicated, not killed. Their cuts were taken, their patches burned. They were cast out, branded as oathbreakers to the entire world, a fate worse than death in their culture. James survived, the bullet grazing his side, his eyes holding a grim satisfaction as he watched the gavel fall. In the days that followed, the club's unity was reforged, stronger than steel. The cleanup was total. With Paul's information, they dismantled the remaining Rattlesnake Alliance from the inside, absorbing their territory without a major fight. Vance, seeing his inside man gone and the club more unified than ever, formally surrendered all claims. 1 month later, Mercy stood in a simple courthouse with Mark, Leo, and Daniel by her side. The judge signed the papers, legal guardianship. Leo was officially, in the eyes of the law, her son, hers and Mark's. For Mark had proposed not with a ring, but with a promise, a shared patch, a shared life, a shared future for their 2 boys. That evening, as the sun set over the compound, Mercy stood on the roof again. She wore her regent vest. Below, the club went about its business, legitimate business mostly. The garage was thriving. The bar was busy. Leo and Daniel raced bikes in the safe, fenced yard, their laughter floating up on the warm air. Mark wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her head. "What are you thinking about?" he murmured. She leaned back into him, watching her sons. "The snow," she said softly, "and a coat." She had gone into the snow that night to save a child. She had found a family. She had found love. And she had built a kingdom, not of fear, but of fierce, unbreakable loyalty. She was no longer just holding the seat for the heir. She was the beating heart of the empire, a mother who had rewritten the rules with a strength no one saw coming. Thank you for watching Mercy's incredible journey. Would you have taken the vest and the throne to protect a child? Let me know in the comments where you're watching from, and subscribe for more stories where an ordinary choice leads to an extraordinary life.